take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, finally, November 27th, 2020. So glad you could be here this afternoon. Hope you had an excellent holiday, and a lot of you had the day off today, maybe from the holiday, maybe because of the way things are these days. And regardless, I hope you found something to be thankful for. I'm very thankful for today being the 1-year anniversary of Boise Hemp World. That's right, Boise Hemp World, our little CBD shop at 6928 West State Street in Boise, Idaho, celebrates its 1-year anniversary today. I'm just thinking back. We opened up a shop in a strip mall on Black Friday. That was the thinking that went into that. But we did it, and it's still open there despite COVID. Some amazing work done by Lori Duckworth and Bill Espenson in keeping that store open throughout the pandemic. And today is the 1-year anniversary. So if you need some CBD products, you need some tinctures, some pain creams, some chocolates, some gummies, dog treats, dog tinctures. We've got them down there with the Mama Duck line and the Billy Dogs line, and they're having a buy one, get one free sale. So if you head down there, it's in the Glenwood Shopping Center at Glenwood and State out there on west side of Boise, 6928 West State Street, or you can check out the other location closer to the downtown area, 1720 West State Street in the Albertson Shopping Center at the location of Albertson's first grocery store. A little bit of Boise trivia for you. Coming up on today's show, we've got a fantastic show because joining me later on in the program and into hour 2 is Diane Goldstein. She's a retired lieutenant from the Redondo Beach Police Department in California. I've known her for a long time in her work with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's now known as Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and she has been recently announced as the incoming executive director. She's been chair of the board for quite some time, but now moving up to take the executive director spot from another friend of the show, Major Neil Franklin, who's stepping down after 10 years of leadership. And how prescient the leadership of Police for Reform, of Law Enforcement Action Partnership has been when you consider the events that have occurred over the past 5 years or so, with people becoming more aware of the need to rein in the police, the militarization of the police, stuff that we've been talking about a lot when we cover the drug war, but now it's getting a little bit broader attention. And so we've got a wide-ranging discussion coming up at the end of the show in our Police for Reform segment, so check that out. Coming up first, we of course have the cannabis headline news for today, and then we're going to do a little drug war data mining, and I'm taking a look at who is becoming marijuana smokers at the greatest rate now that marijuana is being legalized. We're going to break it down generationally. Who do you think's picking up the pipe? Who's toking on the ganj more often now since we've legalized marijuana than before when it was prohibited? You may not be surprised, but it's some interesting numbers. We'll get to that in drug war data mining. Also, I've got a little time in the first hour here for a radical rant where Project Samuel's got this new guy, Luke, who've been following, a really clean-cut Osmond-looking guy. And he had some things to say about social equity that I just can't let pass without ranting a little bit on that. It's always weird how people are so interested in helping racial minorities, except for legalizing marijuana. All right, we got to rant about that. And then if you stay tuned for hour 2, we'll conclude the interview with Diane Goldstein. It'll be a part 2. And then in hour 2, I've got a few things to look at. There's a letter out from celebrities. We'll talk a little bit about it in the news, but some celebrities, some activists, a lot of groups, Law Enforcement Action Partnership signed on to this letter for President Trump to use his powers of clemency that he still has for the next few weeks to help some marijuana prisoners. So we'll tell you who they are, who the celebrities are, who the prisoners are, how long they've been serving. You won't believe some of that, and more when we return. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I'm Radical Russ Belville. You know me. I'm from Idaho, where we've got 2 strains of marijuana, got some and don't. But until I can help legalize marijuana in the Gem State, I can still bring you the best the hemp plant has to offer at Boise Hemp World. Boise Hemp World features the Mama Duck line of CBD tinctures and pain creams and the Billy Dogs line of CBD pet tinctures and dog treats. Hemp World also features CBD candy, gummies, gum, spices, and a whole assortment of tie-dye and hemp clothing and accessories. And under the laws of America's last absolute prohibition state, all Hemp World CBD products are 100% THC free, so you won't fail any drug screenings. Boise Hemp World, now with 2 locations, our flagship store at 6928 West State Street in the Glenwood Shopping Center, and our new location at 1720 West State Street in the Albertson Shopping Center. We're also the headquarters for the Idaho Cannabis Coalition's campaign to legalize medical marijuana in 2022. Find us online at boisehempworld.com or call us toll-free at 844-IDA-HEMP and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Radical Russ here, reminding you that marijuana legalization doesn't just happen. Smart, dedicated activists have put their freedom and future on the line to make it happen. Like the activists at the National Cannabis Industry Association. For over a decade, NCIA has fought for the improvement of regulations concerning the commercial side of medical and recreational marijuana. NCIA also works to bring together marijuana entrepreneurs for education and networking. Get involved by visiting thecannabisindustry.org. And keep it here on Radical Russ Radio for conversations with leaders from this organization, the best marijuana music, and the latest news about cannabis. This is your Cannabis Headline News, brought to you every weekday by Radical Russ Radio at radicalruss.com. Your 24-hour source for marijuana music and cannabis conversations. Subscribe today for just $4.20 at patreon.com/radicalruss. With your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, November 27th, 2020, I'm Russ Belville. Mexico's new president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, popularly known by his initials AMLO, spoke Thursday at a press conference about the marijuana legalization bill recently passed by the Senate. Quote, "The development of freedoms is very important," said the president in a video posted at Marijuana Moment. "Things do not have to be prohibited. If something is authorized, if something is allowed, well, act responsibly. I believe that this will happen in the new legislation on the use of marijuana. Have confidence in people and seek to do good." End quote. In a memorandum released Wednesday, the Attorney General of New Jersey, Gerber Grewal, has, quote, directed all New Jersey municipal, county, and state prosecutors to adjourn, at least until January 25, 2021, any juvenile or adult cases solely involving marijuana possession-related offenses, end quote. The prosecutorial guidance applies to 7 specific marijuana possession and paraphernalia crimes involving amounts less than 50 grams. This follows direction from the AG's office on the day following New Jersey's 2-1 vote legalizing marijuana, emphasizing to police officers that they have broad discretion in handling low-level marijuana offenses, and encouraging them to exercise that discretion in light of anticipated legislative action that may decriminalize marijuana. In a letter sent Monday, the district attorney of Oregon's 3rd largest county has directed police chiefs there to suspend investigations and arrests of low-level drug possession crimes that were decriminalized in Oregon by a 3-2 margin. Though Oregon's Measure 110 decrim law doesn't go into effect until next year, Marijuana Moment reports that Clackamas County Chief Deputy District Attorney Chris Owen wrote, quote, "Having officers investigate and submit cases for a prosecution in the weeks leading up to February 1, which will not lead to any sanction or court-supervised treatment, is not the most effective use of criminal justice resources," end quote. Clackamas is one of 3 counties, including Washington and Multnomah, that make up the greater Portland metro area. Owen explained that the directive applies to cases where there is alleged, quote, possession of up to 1 gram of heroin, 2 grams of methamphetamine and cocaine, 12 grams of psilocybin, 40 user units of LSD, or 40 pills or capsules containing synthetic opiates, end quote. After February 1, such cases are punishable only by a Class E infraction, which carries a maximum $100 fine that will be waived if the possessor visits a counselor for a voluntary drug abuse assessment.
A diverse list of activists and celebrities, including NBA champion Kevin Garnett, formerly incarcerated actor Danny Trejo, rapper Baby Bash, filmmaker Mark Levin, and former Libertarian presidential candidate and New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, have presented President Trump with a list of 22 marijuana prisoners they urge him to grant clemency or pardons to in his lame duck period. The letter explains, quote, "You and you alone have the power to call out a grand hypocrisy of prior administrations. While cannabis became a thriving legal market and enriched many, your predecessors ignored the people who were and are serving long federal terms for doing the same thing," end quote. Among the prisoners cited for release are California medical dispensary operator Luke Scarmazzo and 3 men who have each served 23 years of a life sentence for marijuana: 77-year-old Ricardo Rojas, 72-year-old John Knock, and 60-year-old Pedro Moreno, himself a first-time offender. UK fashion model Jed Texas has been sentenced to 5 years of a possible 20 years in prison in the Indonesian country of Bali for possession of 3 ounces of marijuana. The Sun reports that Texas told the court that he, quote, "knew it was illegal, but I didn't think the sentence would be so high like this," end quote. The former model has also been slapped with a £60,000 fine. If he does not pay it, he will face a further 6 months behind bars. Authorities raided his villa on an anonymous tip, catching Texas in the act of attempting to flush his contraband. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, November 27th, 2020. I'm Russ Belville. Cannabis Headline News is heard at the top of every hour on Radical Russ Radio, and Friday's news is contained within the free Russ Belville Show live podcast. For daily downloads of Cannabis Headline News podcast to your device every morning, subscribe by becoming a patron of Radical Russ Radio.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
In my view, the time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere.
Hey, Radical Russ here, hoping you'll join me live every Friday at 4 p.m. Mountain for the Russ Belville Show. Each week I bring you the latest news in marijuana, analysis of drug war data, and cannabis conversations with the people fighting for the end of adult marijuana prohibition. I'll also throw in a little bit of stoner comedy and my trademark radical rants. It's the Russ Belville Show, live Fridays at 4 p.m., replayed over the following weekdays, and available as a free podcast at radicalruss.com. Coming this fall on Fox.
Season 4 is full of surprises.
From the people who brought you The Masked Singer.
Are you following me, Nick?
No. And the new hit follow-up show, The Masked Dancer.
Make no mistake, you can dance.
Comes the newest show to combine America's love of guessing who's behind a mask.
I told you I had a feeling about this one.
And America's favorite legal drug.
You have some swag.
Tune in Fridays at 4:20 for The Masked Stoner.
Who are you?
Only on Fox. Hey, celebrities, just kidding. It's legal now. You don't have to hide it anymore. You're listening to Radical Russ Radio, right on the edge of America's last absolute prohibition state.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Well, today in the Data Mines, we're going to take a look at figures from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. It's NSDUH. And over the years that I've been tracking this, the tools that they've developed online have developed along with the technology. And it's just amazing. The crosstabs and the drill downs that you can do, information on drugs and mental health and everything you could want to know. So I've dug into that information quite a bit because we hear a lot from our opponents about, marijuana being legalized, and my goodness, won't somebody think of the children? We got to worry about the children here. Oh yeah. So let's just take a look at the data, because you know me, I look shit up. So in 2019, who was it that had the greatest increase in their marijuana use, right? Have the children, since we've legalized, have the children taken up a whole bunch of smoking weed, now that it's legal and it's okay and we all approve of it? Or is it someone else, perhaps? Well, we took a look at the data, and I'll go all the way back to 2005. And the reason why is before 2005, they changed some of the age brackets and some of the definitions. And so it's kind of an apples and oranges comparison. But from 2005 on, this data set's been pretty consistent. So I can ask the same question in 2005 and get the same result in 2019. You know, the input, output, the data, the variables, all that. And I figure that makes a pretty reasonable comparison. Plus, if we take it back to 2005, we can kind of take a look at, what was the trend before legalization happened? Because, sometimes it's cherry picking to just start at legalization and then what happened from then. What was the trend before that? In 2005 takes us before we had Nevada, Colorado voted on a couple in 2006 when it was they were voted down. We had one in 2010 in California that was voted down. And then 2012, we had legalization in Colorado and Washington State. So taking it back to 2005, what I found out was that the group that had the greatest increase wasn't the teenagers. And it wasn't even like college age kids or boomers. It was seniors, people over the age of 65. Their use has gone up almost tenfold since 2005. Now, it was a small number to start with. In 2005, 0.35% of people 65 and older had used marijuana monthly. And we use the monthly variable because that's, you reasonably can say you're a toker at that point. 2019, same group, seniors, 3.38%. So again, at least ninefold, almost tenfold increase. And what was the rate? What was the slope of this increase? Did it take what kind of led to it happening? Legalization. The senior use from 2005 to 2011 only doubled. And maybe we could attribute that to, medical marijuana laws that were starting to get more access at that time. But by 2011 to 2016, half the time, the use doubled again, more than doubled. And then by 2019, just 3 years, it doubled again. So it's really taken off since legalization has happened in Washington, Colorado, and all the states that have followed. And each age group, as you move down the chart, as you move down the age ranges, each age group has a lesser and lesser increase, right? So the seniors went up by about 860%, something like that. The 50 to 64-year-olds, like your boomer age, late Gen X age, that's quadrupled since 2005. For people age 35 to 49, that's up about 2.5 times. And for the 26 to 34, just out of college, young adult age, it's more than doubled. But then you get down to the college age kids, 18 to 24, and about half that group can't legally access marijuana, right? The 18, 19, 20. It's up only just about over a third. It's up just about over a third. Now, maybe this is because everybody in college who wants to smoke pot already was, right? They're the greatest use overall. There's like 23% of 18 to 24-year-olds consume cannabis monthly. And then for the kids, the teens, 12 to 17, we don't want them smoking except medically. Their use is up 11% in 2019 compared to 2005. But it's important to note that it's been lower the past 3 years. So it's just a 1 year kind of blip and maybe not statistically significant. We don't know. And it's been lower since 2005. So it's a number that kind of varies a little bit, but it's not really like having a consistent upslope like the rest of the generations. And if we want to go in terms of relative rates, right, of age groups, right? Someone who's 12 to 17 years old is just about as likely to be a marijuana smoker as someone over the age of 35. It's 7.59% for the 12 to 17 year olds. It's 8.11% for all people over the age of 35. Just about as likely. Then in terms of raw numbers, just the absolute numbers, there are about as many senior marijuana smokers, people over the age of 65 smoking marijuana, as there are underage teenagers smoking marijuana. It's 1.8 million seniors that are smoking marijuana monthly. It's 1.9 million teenagers that are smoking marijuana monthly. That's from the National Survey of Drug Use and Health. Oh, that sound can only mean one thing. I guess we're really close to a very special time where it's important for us to take a break. Yep, there we go. All right, well, you know what that means. It's 4:20 here in the Mountain Time Zone. Yeah, time for us to take our union-mandated safety briefing. When we return, time for a radical rant. Project Sam is attacking marijuana equity. It's hilarious if it wasn't sad.
Almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
I smoke pot, and I like it a lot. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer to use than alcohol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting responsible marijuana smokers in America. And to learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
The show was long and we were just sitting there, and we'd come to play and not just for the ride.
Radical Russ here, reminding you that marijuana legalization doesn't just happen. Smart, dedicated activists have put their freedom and future on the line to make it happen. Like the activists at SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy. SSDP alumni are now leaders in marijuana journalism at Marijuana Moment, Marijuana Government in Massachusetts, and even leading the Drug Policy Alliance. Get involved with the SSDP chapter on your college campus or form one. Everything you need to get started can be found at ssdp.org. And keep it here on Radical Russ Radio for conversations with leaders from this organization, the best marijuana music, and the latest news about cannabis.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, today in the Radical Rant, we revisit the nemesis of my life, Project Samuel, smart approaches to marijuana use, except legalization. You can follow them on Twitter at Smart Approaches. Follow at Smart Approaches. Tell everyone you know. And for the longest time, it's been Kevin Sabet that I've had to deal with, the Joker to my Batman. But now I'm having to deal increasingly with, I think this guy gets to be the Riddler. I think he gets to be the Riddler. It's, and I want to pronounce his name correctly, but I probably won't. But Luke Niferatos. I'm going to have to listen to an introduction one of these days and make sure I get that correct, because I'm not, going to stoop to making fun of someone's name. But Luke is, wow, I got to say, from an optics point of view, from a presentational point of view, what a great spokesperson. The guy's right out of Central Casting. He looks like one of the lost Osmond brothers. It's just, just perfect smile and the haircut and suit and all that. And that calm approach, that calm, reasonable, rational approach that's going to make a lot of people think that he knows what he's talking about. But he recently appeared, I think this was on CNBC, and they were talking about the pressure for legalization in the Northeast now that, New Jersey has passed legalization by a 2-to-1 margin. New Yorkers are supporting it by a 3-to-2 margin. Connecticut's looking at it. Rhode Island's looking at it. We're going to take a look at that in hour 2 as well. And so they're asked about this, and they increasingly, marijuana made a clean sweep. Not only that, we put drugs on the ballot and it passed. So they're increasingly in a desperate position there at Project Samuel. Well, this was Luke on the CNBC talking about this legalization and what he sees as, I guess he sees as a false pretense being made in support of legalization as a way to address social justice issues. So take it away, Luke.
Yeah, so New York rejected recreational legalization in favor of decriminalization because they didn't want to let big tobacco and big pharma and all these major drug industries now that unfortunately have taken over states like mine, Colorado, that chose to allow marijuana legalization. They didn't want that in New York. New Jersey rejected it, Connecticut rejected it, and a lot of it was by members of the Black Caucus, members of the NAACP,
that is 100%
members
not
of social
true in New
justice
York.
groups who do not want that. So that's really what I think the big concern is that this industry is trying to make social justice a profit ploy. They're trying to make billions of dollars off the backs of minority communities, which is exactly where they're putting all the pot shops in Colorado. There's a pot shop for every 42 residents of color in Denver City, and I think that personally is disgusting. And anyone who wants to make a profit off of our low-income minority communities, I don't think they should be allowed to do that. So we really need to be careful about what we're talking about when it comes to legalization.
Yeah, she's right about that's not true. I'll get to that in a second. There's a lot to unpack there, but the one that caught me was there's a pot shop for every 42 residents of color in Denver. That's disgusting. Why? Like, is there a specific number there's supposed to be? You know, I was fine with it when there was one for every 100, but now there's one for every 42. By God, did you know there is a pot shop for every Catholic, bisexual little person in Denver? Every single one. No, I mean, what is he? What's his argument? Is he complaining that there's not enough pot shops? There should be more pot shops because there's more. Should there be fewer? There should be more pot shops for black people. What? I don't know. I don't get it. Regardless, let's go to the other part where he's saying, oh, New York rejected it. Connecticut rejected it. No, here's what happened in those states, in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, is that legalization as it's proceeded in the West has generally proceeded like capitalism proceeds. That is, rich white people get in on it, right? For them, marijuana is just another thing that sells, another thing that you can make a profit off of. And the laws get structured in such a way that only well-capitalized people, usually rich white people, are able to get involved in the market. Now, a lot of that is the fault of the laws in the way they are written themselves that treat marijuana like it's plutonium, where, oh my God, we got to have seed to sale tracking. We got to have $500,000 bonds. You got to have $30,000 non-refundable application fees. Come on. Of course, people can't get involved in that. Regular folks can't get involved in that. But what they were rejecting wasn't legalization. They want legalization. They recognize the problems of prohibition in mass incarceration. They recognize that. No problem there. See, the Project Samuel people have a problem, and that is the racial justice angle finally tipped the scales for a lot of groups that hadn't been on board with marijuana legalization. Groups like the NAACP, groups like more moderate Democrats, more moderate Republican types. So once this became a thing about criminal justice, it became a whole lot more bipartisan when it was, let's stop the bad thing instead of trying to support the bad thing, right? Stop the bad thing being mass incarceration. Support the bad thing being, oh, people smoking pot. Can't be for that. We can't be for drugs. But we can be against locking them up, right? And Project Sam tried to straddle that line too with their little Goldilocks policy proposals of, well, let's just decriminalize and then sentence people to rehabs, and then if they fail their P test, then we'll put them in jail, right? Which is about where Joe Biden is at this point, but I'm going to give Joe Biden a little bit of honeymoon for now. So Luke and the Project Sam people, I mean, they're the kind of people that would look at if black arrests, let's just make up a fake county or fake city, and there were 400 black arrests for marijuana and 100 white arrests for marijuana. And we'd go around saying, oh my God, see, there's a 4-to-1 ratio. Black people get arrested 4-to-1 higher, 400 black arrests, 100 white arrests, 4-to-1 ratio. And so then we go and legalize marijuana, and then the arrests drop to 50 black arrests from 400 down to 50, and then the white arrests drop from 100 down to 10. Why, Project Sam would come out and say, well, look, legalization increased the rate of black arrests by 25%. Yeah, you could do the math, folks. We got from a 4-to-1 ratio to a 5-to-1 ratio. That's an increase of 25%. But we decreased black arrests by 350, and we decreased white arrests by 90. Now, yes, it would be nice if arrests didn't happen in a racially disproportionate manner, but that's a symptom, that's a problem of the criminal justice system itself. I mean, you look up any statistic and you'll tend to find black people get arrested for it more than white people do. It's interesting. You look at studies that show police traffic stops, and they'll find a racially disproportionate nature in the daytime. And then you take a look at those same officers who work at in the night shift when you can't readily see the color of who's driving that car. What do you know? The stops pretty much match up with the racial demographics of the area. What do you know? So, yeah, and the other thing that we need to unpack on this comment from Luke is how much NIMBYism plays into this. He said, "Oh, big marijuana is putting all of their pot shops in the black neighborhoods." Well, no, big marijuana is putting the shops where they're allowed to put the shops. Trust me, man, I've been involved on this end of it for a while these past couple of years. Trying to get a location is damn near impossible. When the city of Ontario here opened up, and I use this term city loosely because it's like 17,000. When they opened up, man, there was like 13 spots in the city, 13 spots, all on the outskirts that were possible, that was even possible you could put a pot shop there. 13 spots. And then, of course, those 13 spots, boop, 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 they went really quick, right? And they're all in like industrial areas here and off the edge of the freeway there, right? The same kind of places where they tend to have black neighborhoods because of redlining and all sorts of institutional racism that goes back for decades. So, Project Sam, don't give me this whole thing about, oh, big marijuana wants to put the pot shops in the black neighborhood. Hell, big marijuana would like to put their shop in the mall. Big marijuana would be very happy putting it right downtown where all the white folks are doing their foot traffic. That we'd love that. It's not us that's making that happen. It's NIMBYism that's making that happen. So another part is those high barriers to entry, like I mentioned. When you have the requirement of a $500,000 bond or $1 million bond, when you have the requirement of having to have a $30,000 non-refundable application fee, when you have especially the barriers where you have you can't get a license if you're previously convicted of a marijuana crime, of a drug trafficking crime. Like, don't you want the people who were doing it illegally to move into doing it legally? Number one, they got experience. They already know how the market works. Number two, you're taking what you define as a criminal off the street and making them a tax-paying member of society. Don't understand that. So Luke and these Project Sam guys, they want to try to divert and obfuscate away from the racial justice angle of ending drug prohibition. And in this case specifically, marijuana prohibition, because that's their gig. But then these claims fall apart as soon as you take your eye off of Denver, right? He mentioned that in his little screed, right? It was, oh, in my city of Denver, oh, it's terrible. Oh, they're preying on the minority neighborhoods, right? Well, yeah, Denver's a city, so it has minority neighborhoods. So what about, say, Maine? What's going on with big marijuana in Maine? Where it's 93.2% white. And a lot of the shops in Maine, so I've read from reports on the internet, are mostly kind of northern. They're kind of out of the city areas. So they're in these rural, very white areas. How about Vermont? Vermont's just approved legal marijuana sales. That's going to go into effect pretty soon. Vermont's like 92.8% white. Montana just approved legal marijuana. A state that's 86.1% white. And the reason it's only that white is have a lot of Native Americans and Hispanics in Montana. Black population in Montana, 0.6%. His name's Bob. No, I'm just kidding. There's, probably more than just Bob. And South Dakota legalized marijuana. by a 54 to 46 margin. South Dakota, a state that's 81.9% white. And again, very little black. Mostly owing, South Dakota would have a large Native American population. So these attacks on marijuana equity bound to fail. I think people are starting to see through this, and it's interesting to me to kind of wonder how long this grift can continue from the Project Samuel type people, the anti-marijuana people. After, like every other election that we've had, they always had something to hang their hat on. They always could say they'd made some progress somehow by stopping somebody somewhere. In 2010, they stopped, 2012, Oregon didn't pass its legalization. In 2014, they were able to stop Florida from getting medical. In 2015, Ohio doesn't pass. In 2016, they stopped it in Arizona. 2018, 19, we blocked it in these legislatures. They didn't adopt it. But of course, as soon as they send it off to the people, it gets passed by a 2-to-1 margin. So that's the fun. I think another fun part of the 2020 election for me is in passing in New Jersey is that the New Jersey legislature just punted on it, right? It was like, we're not going to even try. We can't get it figured out. We can't get all the warring factions to agree, but let's ask the people if we ought to do it. And the people come back with a resounding, yes, please do it. So that's going to lead other legislatures now that have that legislative referral process to start referring these kind of measures. It's going to be interesting to see how that takes place. The marijuana equity part is still important, but I have my own issues with it, and not the same issues as Project Sam would have. I'm all for reparations in the war on drugs. I just think it's important to understand that there are places where the war on drugs that was fought that were very white places. A lot of people in trailer parks, a lot of people in wooded areas and up in the hollers, as they say in Tennessee. They also suffered too. I'd like to see that these things proceed in a manner in which they will disproportionately help the people who were disproportionately harmed, but that it can be not obvious that it's doing that. It can appear as if it's racially neutral. Like my idea has always been, people that have been busted for weed ought to get first in line for getting licenses. I mean, there is a demonstrable harm right there that you can show from the drug war. You were locked up for something that should not have been a crime. I don't care who you are. White, black, Hispanic, it does not matter. If you were busted, I know 2 white guys did 22 years in prison. They deserve to be at the front of that line. So when you come to those kind of equity provisions, I got no problem with it whatsoever. Because it's a racially neutral thing, but it will disproportionately help people of color. They were the ones who were busted more often. They're more likely to be able to play that benefit. So when we start talking about, all right, now we're going to restrict it only to people who lived in certain neighborhoods that were over-patrolled, now I kind of think, well, wait a minute. Now you're just giving someone a benefit based on where they lived. Well, yeah, where they lived was over-policed. And it was, yeah, that's true, but not just because of the war on drugs. Redlining had a lot to do with that. Jim Crow had a lot to do with that. Why is marijuana legalization being called to solve everything that preceded it? And someone tweeted this the other day, and I thought it deserves some thought, is this idea that, marijuana legalization harmed the people that smoked marijuana. So to help the people that were harmed by the people who smoked marijuana, we're going to tax the people who smoke marijuana. Oh, wait a minute. The people that smoked marijuana didn't cause the harm. It was the people who busted the people who smoked the marijuana that caused the harm. It was the people who passed the laws that allowed them to bust the people who smoked the marijuana that caused the harm. Not the people who were buying it, not the people who were selling it, and not the people who were growing it. They weren't causing the harm. But then we're talking about taking, tax revenues from general funds and such, and that doesn't play as well politically. It sounds a whole lot better to say, hey, white guys are getting rich, and that's a bad thing. So now we're going to set up rules that favor people, and then this group's going to fight with this group, and then the next thing you know, it's all fighting about, who gets which piece of the pie and how big, and we've lost track of the fact that people are in prison. People are in jail. People are in jail on charges that may never go to court, that they may plea out of. And now with COVID, people are in jail for marijuana charges, and that could be a death sentence. Catching COVID in a prison or in a county jail somewhere, waiting, can't bail out, and you're just waiting. It's insane. And this isn't 2012 anymore. It's 2020. I got 15 states that have marijuana legalization at this point. It's pretty well established that people want this and don't want it to be criminalized anymore. You wonder how long we're going to have to keep doing that. We'll see. As the Northeast falls, and we'll talk about that in hour 2, the moves in the Northeast. As we get New York and some of those bigger states, it's going to fall quicker than you think. 41 after the hour, I'm Radical Russ here, live from Onionville. Thanks for joining me, and you can become a patron if you want to help defray the cost. Just check it out. Patreon.com/RadicalRuss.
Hi, I'm Radical Russ Belville, the sole producer of this 24-hour marijuana music and cannabis conversation stream I call Radical Russ Radio. As part of my mission to educate and entertain people about the need to end adult marijuana prohibition, I produce the Russ Belville Show podcast every week, available absolutely free wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you who'd like to help support my mission financially, you can become a Radical Russ Radio VIP at patreon.com/RadicalRuss or by clicking the link for Toker Talk Radio in the main menu. For just $4.20 a month, VIPs will receive the exclusive download of Hour 2 of my podcast, Toker Talk Radio, every week, as well as the 5-minute cannabis headline news every weekday. Upgrade to the $14.20 a month tier, and you'll get those podcasts and a set of custom patriotic pro-marijuana stickers from me every quarter. And if you can afford to support Radical Russ Radio at $44.20 a month, you get my podcast, and each quarter you receive a poster, then a mug, then a t-shirt, and finally a hoodie that proclaim your support for ending adult marijuana prohibition. I literally cannot do this without you. Your support enables me to continue my life's work, and I thank you for it. Visit patreon.com/RadicalRuss and become a Radical Russ Radio VIP today. The I Am Cannabis Sativa podcast is now replaying on Radical Russ Radio. Join host Dan Scotland for a review of the news and events in the cannabis community with frequent updates throughout the week. Visit IamCannabisSativa.com to subscribe and check RadicalRuss.com/schedule for show replay times. Now, as a service to listeners considering the use of pharmaceutical medications that, unlike marijuana, are approved for medical use by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, the Russ Belville Show presents the Big Pharma Ad of the Day.
Opdivo significantly increased the chance of living longer versus chemotherapy. Opdivo works with your immune system. Opdivo can cause your immune system to attack normal organs and tissues in your body and affect how they work.
Wait, hold up. Makes my immune system attack my own organs?
This may happen anytime during or after treatment has ended and may become serious and lead to death.
You don't say.
See your doctor right away if you experience new or worsening cough, chest pain, shortness of breath, diarrhea, severe stomach pain or tenderness, severe nausea or vomiting, extreme fatigue, constipation, excessive thirst or urine, swollen ankles, loss of appetite, rash, itching, headache.
Medical marijuana. Not approved by the FDA, but it's not going to kill your organs either.
The war on drugs is just one symptom of the American criminal justice system gone awry. Reforms are desperately needed in the areas of mass incarceration to asset forfeiture, police brutality to racial profiling, mandatory minimum sentencing to solitary confinement, and so much more. One group of law enforcement professionals has recognized the need to reform policing to better protect and serve the people. Join us now for another discussion with a speaker from LEAP, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, in this edition of Police for Reform.
Welcome back, everybody. And for today's discussion, our cannabis conversation, we're speaking with the chair of Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And I'm so excited to announce the new, or soon to be new, executive director of Law Enforcement Action Partnership. It's retired Lieutenant Commander from the Redondo Beach Police Department, Diane Goldstein, joining us. Hello, Diane.
Hey, Russ, and really kind of the title, although I was a commander when I retired, it's just retired lieutenant.
Retired lieutenant. Okay, that sounds good. Diane, of course, you're taking the reins, the start of the new year from Neil Franklin. Is that correct?
That's correct. Effective January 1st, Neil has been with LEAP as the executive director for over 10 years, plus a storied 34-year career with both Baltimore Police Department and Maryland State Police. And he, at this point, is going to continue as a member of our board of directors, continue to work with us, but it was time to retire.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is an amazing opportunity and kind of a crossroads for the folks at Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Listeners to my show for years have heard me speaking with Neil on a number of topics, but mostly about prohibition, because LEAP's genesis was law enforcement against prohibition. Now that that mission has expanded, and it couldn't have been at a better time as far as the events that we're seeing across the country. Let's talk a little bit about LEAP's mission as an action partnership. What actions are you seeking to take in this meeting?
Well, you know, there's always going to be the focus on drug policy. And what we saw when we, I don't want to talk about it as rebranding, but it really was. And so when we were a single focus policy organization just based on education, on the many failures of drug prohibition, what we saw, Russ, was there were a significant number of criminal justice professionals, active criminal justice professionals across, you know, the broad spectrum of policing, you know, prosecutors, and everyone in between, who approached us and said, look, I can't talk about legalizing drugs, but I can talk about many other things that support ending the failed drug war. And we recognized back then that it was very critical for us to have as many diverse voices that talked about not just, you know, the systemic failures of drug prohibition, you know, that were based on, you know, racism, but that there were so many other issues within policing and the criminal justice system that needed to be addressed. So our 5 pillars continue to be drug policing, mass incarceration, harm reduction, you know, the transformation of policing and police accountability, as well as the work that we're doing on the international level. So last year, before COVID hit, I was actually in Vienna, Austria, doing a presentation on the full drug decriminalization with our LEAP UK branch, and Chief Brendan Cox, who's one of our speakers and who also runs law enforcement assisted diversion. So, you know, we're continuing to push the message because we really feel that drug policy is at its roots the basis of so many issues and so many problems with the criminal justice system.
You mentioned the racism inherent in drug prohibition, and that's one of the things we've seen emerge as states have been taking on legalization, especially states in the Northeast, as they bring up the idea of the drug policies that have been disproportionately affecting African Americans. So, in that respect, though, we hear the stat many times of there's people of color are just as likely to use, say, marijuana as white people, but they're far more likely to get busted for it. Yet when we take a look at other policing statistics, that seems to happen across the board for people of color. When we're talking about, graffiti or traffic stops. So in what way can LEAP approach the racism that seems to be inherent in policing itself, not just the drug war?
Well, I think it's about cultural shifts on top of everything that we're doing. And so we know that, as we continue to sensibly regulate drugs is what LEAP is trying to do. And many of the things that we propose is that we have to diminish the wide footprint of law enforcement. And I think what people may fail to recognize is that there's many law enforcement leaders today that recognize that they only have limited tools and that they no longer want to respond to mental health calls or drug overdose calls, and so law enforcement in many aspects, because of government, when they took away, mental health resources, when they defunded community resources, law enforcement became the catch-all to socioeconomic issues. So one of the things that we're focused on right now, we just released a really great report called the Community Responder Model. We ended up partnering with the Center for American Progress and trying to identify how many calls really law enforcement should or should not be responding to. And so one of the things that we're supporting is investing money in civilian community responders that can solve some of these problems without law enforcement involvement. And, you're in Oregon is Eugene, the Cahoots model is one model. The STAR program in Denver is another model. Olympia, Washington just expanded their community responder program. And what we're seeing, it's fiscally sound. In Eugene, I think in 2019, it had something like 24,000 calls, and less than 1% of them did they have to call law enforcement for backup when they responded to a mental health crisis or a substance use overdose type of crisis. So those are, LEAP is moving away, even though we'll always be out there educating the public and working hand in hand with our collaborative partners to implement smart on crime policy and change the laws. But we're also looking to identify models that cities can in fact implement that will better serve communities and kind of cut the ties between law enforcement having to respond to those graffiti calls or, to, a minor trespass call.
It sounds like functionally what we're talking about is something we hear from activists on the left, the call for defunding the police, which has gotten some criticism for its rhetoric, but the idea behind it being to reallocate funds that are normally given to people with badges and guns and then give that to, like you say, civilian responders and such. Is that accurate?
Well, I think, our organization for years has been calling for the defunding of the drug war. And so we've been kind of on that cutting edge where we were once outliers that recognized that the heavy investment in supply side interventions for drug enforcement really did a lot of damage in communities. And some of that damage was, in fact, defunding community infrastructure, drug treatment on demand, job training, after school programs. For whatever reason, our government likes to fund on the back end of socioeconomic issues, law enforcement, the courts, corrections rather than the front end. And so we're finally, because of the death of George Floyd and because of the hard work of many grassroots organizations, Black Lives Matter, who've been trying to say, hey, look at this. There are things that can be done before law enforcement should respond. And I think that the concern, honestly, is I wrote an article just probably about a month ago that talked about this issue is, Gallup recently did some pretty significant polling on this issue of defunding the police and, what should law enforcement do and what's our role. And what we saw out of that polling was even in communities that law enforcement has marginalized and devastated with these, tough on crime policies, is Black Americans don't want to defund the police completely. They just want good policing. And so, and across the board, both, Blacks and whites and everyone in between recognizes the policing as it is right now needs to be completely transformed, not just reformed. I mean, really transformed. And so I think there's a lot of momentum right now, but we have to also do this smartly. You can't just defund the police. I mean, Seattle Police Department and the city council has done a disservice to their communities by taking so much money away initially and not scaling it properly. And I think that there are smart ways of doing this. City of Los Angeles, or actually the County of Los Angeles, just voted in Measure J that basically says 10% of the entire county budget will go to alternatives to incarceration, reentry programs, diversion, mental health resources, drug treatment on demand. And so they're going to look at how to adequately fund those resources. And at the same time, they will scale down the size of law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And so you have to, from an economic standpoint, you can't scale up those critical infrastructure programs and descale law enforcement in a manner that it has to be scaled properly. Because what we're seeing right now, COVID is causing some pretty significant issues relative to violence. Is one of the issues is we have shootings up across the country. And every academic that I've spoken to, every grassroots organizer that we're working with, allied partners, all of us are incredibly concerned that if we divest from law enforcement too quickly, you're going to have this huge pushback against reform. So it's got to be done strategically and smartly, and it's got to have all the stakeholders at the table. And so, one of the things that as I move forward in my role as the executive director, you and I have had this conversation about what should public safety mean. And for years, I have said that we have invested, in a car and in car tires, but we've only blown up 1 out of the 4. And so until we adequately invest across all levels, we're going to continue to see some issues or problems. So now we're at the point that we have to invest up in community resources to the same level that we've invested in the criminal justice system and law enforcement. And then we can start scaling back the massive footprint of not just policing, but the entire criminal justice system.
We're speaking with Diane Goldstein, the incoming Executive Director for Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And Diane, do you still have the same website info?
Yeah, we're www.lawenforcementAction.org.
LawenforcementAction.org.
And lawenforcementAction.org. Sorry about that. Got a problem with the recording there, but hey, that's all for hour 1. Stay tuned. We're going to finish our discussion with Diane Goldstein right over the top of the hour here for everyone here in Onionville, Tragic County, Oregon. I'm Radical Russ. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.